Hi, my name is Kira Allison, and I'm a second-year medical student at the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine, and you're listening to Do or Do Not. On today's episode, we will be speaking with Dr. Margaret Wilson, the current dean at A.T. Still University's Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is the founding school of osteopathy. Dr. Wilson actually grew up in Kirksville, Missouri, and is a graduate of the very same school. She did a rotating internship in Ohio and became a family practitioner and worked with the National Service Health Corps. Dr. Wilson is a true leader and role model to all osteopathic physicians. She serves as the chairman on the Board of Deans for the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, also known as AACOM, where she works diligently to promote osteopathic medical education. We know that you will be inspired by this amazing physician.
Dr. Wilson, we're so excited to have you on the podcast tonight.
Hey, well, thank you. I'm excited and happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So I'm trying to find great DOs to interview. And when I spoke to Karen Nichols, she said you are a must-have on the podcast. She's a big fan.
Wow. Well, that's quite an honor because she's certainly a great DO and someone I really respect. And she's been a wonderful mentor to me. I really appreciate her support there.
Dr. Wilson, do you mind if I call you Margaret for the interview?
No, that's fine.
Now, I know you have a position on AACOM. Is that how you would say it?
AACOM or AACOM, whatever you like to call it.
For our listeners, there are medical students listening and DO students. Can you explain a little bit what the letters stand for and what the organization does?
Yeah, it's the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. AACOM represents all the schools of osteopathic medicine in the United States. So it's the organization that basically serves with a board of deans. So a dean from each of the COMs around the country is represented as that body. So we, basically work on related medical education topics and activities to promote the profession and to make sure the schools are supported in things like admissions and undergraduate medical education and even GME.
We're trying to build out our website to kind of support students interested in osteopathic medicine, pre-med students and DO students. So the website has a lot of information on it. And looking through, that's really where students would go. That's where pre-med students would go to apply. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. They apply through the AACOM system, which is part of AACOMS.
So really the association does everything pre-med through medical education for osteopaths.
Yeah, basically that would be correct.
What is your role on the committee that you serve?
Well, currently I'm the chair of the AACOM Board of Deans. So, we serve the Board of Deans, again, made up of all the deans across all the COMs. Dr. Robert Kane is the president and the CEO of AACOM. So basically, he works with the Board of Deans. We advise him. He directs the larger institution of AACOM. But as chair, I conduct the meetings. So it's my job to conduct our Board of Deans meetings and, again, to meet regularly with the president and CEO, Dr. Kane, and to help advise him and help him as he directs all the projects and activities that AACOM is involved in.
It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I wanted to start by talking to you about Kirksville specifically. So you are dean at AT Still Com. Is that the name of the school?
ATSU is the university, so we're ATSU KCOM, the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine. We are one of 6 schools under the university, but we, of course, as you know, are the founding school, and proudly so.
So just to start talking about Kirksville, when I was looking at medical schools, I became intrigued with osteopathic school. I grew up in New York, and one of the people that we interviewed recently, one of the osteopaths that we interviewed kind of made a statement that New Yorkers feel like there's nothing outside New York. And I hate to say it, but sometimes I think we do feel that way. But I was really into osteopathy, and I was very fortunate that I got an interview at Kirksville. I made a stop in Kansas City, and I interviewed in Kansas City, and then I moved on to Kirksville. And I really just found it to be sort of a spiritual experience. Do you think a lot of people that come to Kirksville really interested in osteopathy find it that way?
Oh, absolutely. We always say that we're so proud of our history, but we never rest on our laurels. We're always looking how to improve. But there is something spiritual, I think, about being part of the founding side of the profession. And if it doesn't touch you when you first visit it, I guarantee by the time you've spent some time in Kirksville, you will feel that there's something different and special about Kirksville and our founding school.
Now, as far as the students that you select to come to Kirksville, do you think a lot of them are more into or coming to the school because they have a strong interest in osteopathy or because they're located in the Midwest in the area? Or do you think you just attract general medical students because of the quality of the education there, or a little bit of both?
I think there's a little bit of all of those things. Certainly, I think first and foremost, people probably come because of our reputation. The reputation of being the founding school and really holding true to the osteopathic principles, but also to the reputation of the quality education. And our graduates speak for that. Certainly, a lot of them are from kind of more the Midwestern territory, just because now there's so many comms across the country to choose from, and some people choose to stay closer to home. And so we certainly have some of that. But I think if you would talk to students, they still look to Kirksville as being the place for a really strong osteopathic medical education and a strong medical education in general. Some of them more drawn to the osteopathic principles than others. We know that is true.
Going back to my memory, and it's crazy how fast time goes, but probably interviewed about 20 years ago, but I still remember seeing the museum and the first school and being able to, and I don't know if you could still touch these things, but I remember touching A.T. Still's cane and seeing some of his original belongings. Are those things all still there? And do people come to see them?
Absolutely. People come from all over the world to see the historic artifacts and experience the history of Kirksville. They literally do. I don't think pre-COVID there would be a week go by that there weren't international visitors down in the museum. Yeah, you can still touch all those things. For school, the cabin, they're all preserved indoors now to protect them from the effects of the environment. The museum is incredible. I would tell anybody that has an interest in osteopathy, if you can at some time in your life make that pilgrimage just to see and experience our museum, it's incredible. And one of the probably coolest things about my job is if you sit in my office, the dean's office, and you look up on the wall, there in a little case, actually a big case, is two canes, a cane and a walking stick that Dr. Still used. And so it kind of gives you goosebumps some days to look up there and realize the history that we all represent.
Tian Yu is the medical student from AACOM that actually started the podcast with me. And when we first sat and talked about the idea, I have a copy of Philosophy of Osteopathy on my shelf, and I'm a gastroenterologist who really does colonoscopies and, for better or worse, just sort of a regular doctor with a big heart and a good philosophy or a good outlook on things. But I showed him specifically that I was proud that I still had this book on my shelf, and I think it's important.
Yeah. When you're in Kirksville, and I think for all of us that live and work here, we still feel that. We still feel that tie to our past, and it helps us carry us into our future. I kind of always joke that I feel like the spirit of Dr. still wanders the hall.
It's so funny. Let me ask you about some of the more modern things that Kirksville offers. I was looking at some of the programs that the school has, and some of the things that are talked about are an ultrasound program, complementary and alternative medicine program, and some of the dual degree programs that are offered by Kirksville, which seem very progressive. Can you just talk about those things a little bit?
Yeah, again, even though we hold true to our roots and we still have a very strong OMT, the manipulative portion of our curriculum, we have some really high-tech areas of our curriculum that we're really proud of. One that you mentioned there, the ultrasound program, we were probably the first osteopathic school to really start embracing ultrasound curriculum. A number of years ago, we had the opportunity to kind of develop that and integrate it into our curriculum with anatomy and with the O&M component. So our students all learn ultrasound skills. They integrate it with their anatomy. So they're learning living anatomy as they still do their cadaveric dissection. Then they'll go into the room and, actually watch that heart and those heart valves pump after they've had the chance to dissect. They learn all the kind of special ultrasound procedures like FAST exam and OB exams. And we use a lot in the musculoskeletal labs to, help with aid in diagnosis and injection techniques and kind of enhance what they learn with their hands-on in O&M. So we're really proud of that ultrasound program. Just anecdotally, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story where one of our third-year students was green and new and out on rotation, and there was a snowstorm, and they're at some hospital, and the ultrasound tech can't make it into the ER to evaluate a patient, and one of our students would step up and do the complete exam and wow all their colleagues there. So it's been a really valuable program. I think the skill set that students learn, and it's been one that I think, again, on the admissions side has really attracted a lot of students to our program because they know they're going to walk away with those skills. The other side in terms of technology, if you come to Kirksville, in addition to the museum, you need to visit our simulation lab. We have a just incredible human patient simulation lab with all the mannequins that simulate all sorts of disease and acute kind of medical emergencies. And we have an OB model. I think she delivered about 800 babies last year. We have, models all the way from newborns to adult. And so we use that simulation lab a lot, and our students train there. And again, just the level of technology, it's very, very impressive. We're very proud of that also.
Yeah, it sounds like, exactly as you said, it's a big dichotomy of history and high-tech learning. That can't beat that.
Yeah.
Margaret, can you tell me, and again, this may sound a little obtuse, but just generally what your day looks like for you and what exactly the responsibilities. I know a lot of medical students, myself included, when I was walking around, were in awe of the dean and maybe a little nervous when the dean was around. Right? Tell me what your day looks like and your responsibilities are as dean.
Yeah, as dean, interesting question, because prior to becoming dean, I kind of wondered that too. What would my day-to-day look like? What are all the responsibilities? I tell my own medical students, I said, being the dean is kind of like being the CEO of a large corporation. I'm not down there making the widgets every day, and I may not know everything on the line needed for the widgets, but, I'm in charge of everybody else in every other department to make sure that they get their job done and that they have the resources and support to make sure that the whole school runs. So I work largely also with the university for initiatives there in terms of the school. Obviously I'm in charge of the curriculum, but we have a huge team that delivers and does the day-to-day work on the curriculum. I'm there to assure that we meet all our accreditation standards so that we continue to be fully accredited. I'm responsible for the budget, responsible ultimately for, faculty and student needs. But again, there's a lot of departments and a lot of people between me and those day-to-day responsibilities there. So I make sure our curriculum department works. I make sure our clinical education department works. I make sure all those pieces, our GME department, are able to meet, their responsibilities and needs that ultimately serve our students. Day to day, my day's full of a lot of meetings. I'll be honest with you on that. I usually get there about 6:30 in the morning, and I like to try to get home at about 5 at night if I don't have night meetings. So, lots of meetings in between. Again, serve on university committees. Obviously, I serve on a number of AACOM committees that put me in the, national service realm. It's never a dull moment, I'll tell you that. There's always, a problem to be solved. I've been a family practice physician for 35 some years, and in some ways being a dean is similar, that you're solving problems, not the individual people problems quite in the same manner, but you're solving problems a lot of part of your day to try to answer the needs of students or faculty or the institution.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy of clinical medicine to administration. I think we've had a few other administrators on the show and kind of echo your sentiment. So, Margaret, let me ask you, can you tell us where you grew up and where you went to college and when you first became interested in medicine and decided you wanted to be a doctor?
Okay, you're going to love this one. I grew up in Kirksville.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm one of those anomalies. I grew up here and somehow without any plan or specific purpose, I ended up back here. I grew up in Kirksville, so I always say I grew up with osteopathy, and I grew up with the greats of osteopathy. They lived around me. They took care of my parents and grandparents. Dr. Gutensong, who is historic in our profession, at least in our local community, a big DO that was well known. I grew up here. That's all I knew. I honestly didn't really even probably know what an MD was till I was probably in high school. So I think that kind of, again, that philosophy, those principles, I saw them live and breathe in the people around me. My next door neighbor when I was little growing up was Dr. Delbert Maddox. And for those around this part of the country, they'll remember Dr. Maddox as being an outstanding DO. And, he'd always come over when I had tonsillitis. He'd just come next door and take care of me. So I was very privileged that way. I went to then college at what is now Truman State University, which again is here in Kirksville. And I went to school there. But I can honestly say by the time I was 13 years old, I had decided I absolutely wanted to be a DO. There was nothing else I wanted to be. I had two older brothers that were DOs, but I think my interest started again, even prior to that, just being around, so many DOs growing up. And, my parents tried to interest me in applying to an allopathic medical school, but I wouldn't have anything to do with that. I only wanted to go to KSUM from a very young age, and I kind of powered through. I graduated from high school early and then graduated from college early and was accepted to KSUM and started there when I was 20 years old. So I was determined to be a DO.
That's amazing. Now I know why Karen Nichols recommended that I interview you. I love that. That is a great story. So now let me ask you, when you were in medical school, there must have been students from all over the place. Was that interesting? Did you find that everybody was really excited to be in Kirksville? Like, were you amazed that people were coming to your hometown to study and learn?
Yeah, again, when I was started KSOM back in the late 70s, we were a national school. We still are, but people came from all over the country. My anatomy lab partners were from all parts of the country. So it was amazing, but yeah, not unusual because we knew people came to Kirksville to go to this exceptional school. One thing about when I went to medical school is there weren't very many women in medical school. I think we had out of 135, I think we had 13 women. So we were definitely a minority in terms of gender during that era. So it was some interesting times. And I'm sure Dr. Nichols could tell you the same from being a woman in kind of those years where that wasn't a common pathway for women to pursue in terms of a career. Most of them went into nursing. If you ever have a chance, Ian, have you seen The Feminine Touch? Have you seen that movie?
I absolutely have. It's amazing. I definitely want to talk to you more about it. And we have it on our website, actually. We have it posted. I think it's great.
Yeah, so I love that history. But yeah, people came from all over the country, made a lot of friends that then went maybe back to their home states or other places during those eras. So it was always interesting to see how somebody like, particularly maybe from the East Coast, like New Yorkers that came out to school and them adapting to kind of rural life out in the country.
It's interesting. Again, just from my experience, I only spent a day in Kirksville and I ended up, it's a silly story, but I ended up in New York just because I had a girlfriend in New York. But if it wasn't for her, I probably would have ended up in Kirksville. And I remember it was a very small airport that we flew into, and the town was much smaller, obviously, than New York, but it was lovely. It was just a really nice place.
I remember a funny story that one of my attendings later on when I was out in Dayton, Ohio at Grandview Hospital had said he came to Kirksville, and I think he was from either Ohio or the East Coast somewhere. And he couldn't understand that, when he was driving into Kirksville, everybody was waving, and he thought something was very strange and off. He didn't know why everybody waved, and he kind of asked, well, why every car I passed waved at me? And people said, that's just being in the country. People are very friendly. They wave whether they know you or not.
People are definitely not waving at you in New York. So I could definitely, that's definitely a good story. And I understand why he was confused.
Maybe another gesture, huh?
Yeah, exactly. We won't go there. We won't go there. So let me ask you, when did you decide you wanted to do family practice? And did you stay in Kirksville for your residency as well?
I did my postgraduate training I did at Grandview Hospital in Dayton, Ohio. And this was back in kind of old school before family medicine had really grown into a huge residency track. So actually, I did the 1 year rotating internship and then got board certified thereafter. So I did the traditional internship. I would tell you when I decided on family medicine, that's kind of hard to say. When I was in those clinical years as a student, I loved everything. When I was on cardiology, I loved cardiology. When I was on pediatrics, I loved pediatrics. So it was a good kind of ground laying for family medicine. I was really interested in OB-GYN, and I think I came very close to choosing that and pursuing a residency in OB-GYN, but I had a National Health Service Corps obligation, and I think I decided on family medicine to go ahead and step into that, and I'm glad I did. I wouldn't have ever done anything differently in hindsight.
So you were practicing family medicine, obviously, you already said, for a long time. When did you decide and why did you decide to go into academic medicine? And did you have to leave your practice at that point?
Yeah, so kind of timeline. When I left Dayton, I was in the National Health Service Corps and I had a 2 year commitment. And I served that in you think Kirksville is rural. I was in rural Kansas in a town of like 800. And that's a whole nother long podcast story, I guess, about really practicing in rural medicine. And when I was done with the National Health Service Corps, I was starting to look at practice opportunities and deciding what to do next. And I had a phone call from one of my old mentors here in Kirksville who kind of out of the blue to call me and said, what are you doing? You're finishing up. What are you going to do? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm just looking at different opportunities. He said, why don't you come back to Kirksville and work for me in the rural clinic system? At the time, we had the rural clinics here in Northeast Missouri. And I said, well, okay, I didn't have anything else planned. I'll try that for a while. And I came back and it's kind of, as they say, the rest is history. I just gradually kept getting more involved in medical education, started certainly as a preceptor and precepting students in the clinic and did a lot of education in that realm. And then, started getting asked to help with the more formal teaching program and started getting asked to lecture and help with labs. And, before I knew it, I was chair of the Department of Family Medicine at the school. And during those years, I mostly worked kind of half and half academically and half or a little more than half clinically. And, it just kind of evolved that way. Like I say, I never really looked towards academic medicine as a career. It wasn't something I consciously sought out and went after, but it just happened. Probably one of those situations where, when you have a hard time saying no to people and they ask you to do things, you just keep saying yes and more things happen. And then I was chair of the family medicine department there at K-SWIM for 20 some years. And people always ask me, well, why did you want to be dean? And, maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but I always answer with, I never wanted to be dean. I was asked to, apply and to look at this position. And, the reason I agreed to go down that path is, quite honestly, I love my school and I love my profession. I love this place. I love my school and I love our profession. And I'm so proud of it. I would do anything to serve and help it. So here I am. And it's been a good journey. I still see patients 1 day a week. That's where I'm at today. I happen to be in my clinic on Tuesdays. And I tell my students I do it for two reasons. One, I think it's good for me to stay with my toe in the pool to continue to know better what's going on in medicine in general and the healthcare systems and all the changes and challenges that our students and our residents are going to have to meet. But I do it because I love patient care. I still love patient care all these years later. So that's why I'm still doing it all.
Yeah, I got to say that sounds like a very full plate. Yeah, I agree. I totally love clinical medicine and I have a clinical practice. I think it sounds like you're doing like 18 jobs at the same time, which is
probably so.
I just want to touch on one thing that you said that I find so fascinating. which is, you said, when you always say yes, that's when things happen. And we recently interviewed Dr. Hank Chowdhury, who's at the ACGME now.
Right. Yeah.
You know Hank.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And again, it's amazing when people, and I think this is what our listeners really need to tune into, say similar things. Obviously they're true. So, Hank said that he felt that he also kind of got to where he is because he always says yes and take on more things. But then on the other side, he also made a comment that sometimes, unfortunately, you have to figure out when to say no. And that really is a point where you gain some work-life balance. So I guess maybe that's a good transition point. Do you have hobbies? Are there things that you do to keep your work-life balance? And what is your family like? Are they supportive of your career?
Again, I don't think, anybody could do these type of jobs without family support. And I've been lucky, through my career, my husband has had a flexible job to really take on a large portion of childcare responsibilities. I have 3 kids. I think, again, you have to really work at balancing your life. When my kids were little and younger, I just worked to do that. Certainly now that they're grown up, it's a lot easier to give the amount of time and meet all the demands that this particular job as a dean of a medical school requires. So certainly couldn't have done it when my kids were little. You just have to work at it. Sometimes you fail and sometimes you do better. But I try to find just some of that emotional and spiritual balance to the work. I really enjoy just time with family and I like to garden. I found that I took up gardening when I became a dean. I happened to be able to start that just because I had the space at the time in my yard. And that's been a real, kind of good way to wind down at the end of the day is go out and, weed and water and those kind of things. I enjoy playing golf. I enjoy, reading. So, I think all of us, no matter, what profession or what career we may be in, have to really kind of make an effort because work can certainly be all consuming. So it just takes a little bit of focus to try to make sure you have that time.
That's great, Margaret. That's great advice. I have just a few more questions for you. So the first one is just a manipulation question. Again, obviously, you're like Kirksville all the way. You're dean of the founding medical school for osteopathy. Do you actually practice manipulation with your patients, with the patients that you see in clinic?
Oh, yeah, sure. I practiced the OMT component throughout my career as a family medicine doctor. Certainly used it a lot over the years. Because I have a very limited practice now, I don't get to use it as much, obviously, because I'm not here seeing nearly as many patients. But yeah, I think we often forget as DOs, sometimes we just forget that we have something extra to offer, whether it be, whatever specialty you might be, even if we don't use the hands-on skill. I think there's just something different how we approach the patient and listen to the patient and engage and interact with the patient that we all have as DOs in our training to offer patient care.
So there's a book that I read recently called Range by a man named Epstein. And it's not about medicine. It's more about general, just life path. And Epstein poses an idea that sometimes our society focuses on the straight and narrow, just going down the straight path, staying focused, and just doing one thing. And his idea is that it may be better to have range. Again, the name of the book is Range, and have a little bit more experience in life before you go on your ultimate journey. And sometimes I think about that as far as osteopathy goes, where I feel like a lot of schools stress or when they look at students, they look at more than MCAT scores and grades, and they really look a lot more at life experience than maybe some of their allopathic counterparts. So my questions for you are, do you think that this concept in some ways explains some of the successes of osteopathic physicians? And do you think that his theory applies to osteopathic medical school?
I think perhaps it surely could. We always say that our admissions process for our school is what we call a holistic approach. We don't look at just their academic record and their MCAT scores and their GPA and those kind of things. That we look beyond. We really look at their life experiences, their, service orientation. What is their philosophy? What is their professional behaviors that maybe, make them stand out? So I think there is much more to a medical student than just what you see on paper. And, we believe that here at Kirksville, we still do in face-to-face one-on-one interviews. So if a matriculant admissions candidate comes to, our school, they're going to meet with real people that sit down with them for 30 or 45 minutes and really try to get to know them and really get those life stories out of them, because some of these young people have incredible stories, just incredible life stories, and what drives them and what's the passion that, brings them to us and to osteopathic medicine, perhaps in specifically. I do think we don't want to lose that as part of how we engage with people that are interested in medicine and the range that they may bring to us, because, that's often what makes them exceptional physicians down the road.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Great answer. Thank you. My last question, and sort of our grand finale question, one of my favorites, but I think a difficult question, is what is the best piece of advice that was given to you throughout your education, whether it be growing up from your parents or a teacher in college, professor in medical school, or an attending in residency or internship, that you always think back and remember and feel gave you value, that helped you or guided you, that you think is important to pass on to other students?
Boy, that's a tough one. If I go back to the beginning, what I think most of my successes in life and what shaped me the most were my parents, and that they always encouraged all of us that as long as you work hard and you try to do the right thing and be a good person, you can do whatever you want. And, I grew up the only girl in a family of all brothers. And, I was never held back by my gender. My parents, we were all equal. We could all dream the same dreams and be whatever we want regardless. And, I think, again, if you're just willing to work hard and go after, follow your passion, follow your dream, you can be or have whatever you want in terms of success. The other thing that kind of sticks out in my mind as a piece of advice was when I took the job of dean, the president at the time, President Jack Magruder, who was a wonderful mentor and friend of mine to this day, told me, he said, it's a hard job, but remember, really at the end of the day, you just need to listen to people. They want to be listened to. And what great advice, and really, again, takes me back to my family practice roots, that most of the time, that's what people want the most. They want to be able to be heard and for us to listen. Those are the two things that come to mind.
Yeah, that second piece I love. I think that's the ultimate doctor advice, is that even though patients come to you looking for help and advice, most of the time they just want you to listen to them, right? I mean, that's unbelievable advice. I think that's so true. Margaret, thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for doing this. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people to learn more about, hopefully, our profession.
Margaret, you're great. Thank you so much.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.